He never yelled at me. He never cheated. Everyone said I was lucky, so I spent years convincing myself the emptiness was my fault. This is the story of how I slowly disappeared while loving someone who was always right there. He never raised his voice at me, and that was the first reason I believed we were healthy. I had come from relationships where love was loud, where emotions arrived like storms and left damage behind, where every disagreement felt like a test I was failing. When I met him, I was tired in a way sleep never fixed. Tired of intensity disguised as passion, tired of apologizing for wanting peace. He was calm, almost gentle, the kind of man who didn't rush his words and never seemed overwhelmed by feelings. When we first talked, he listened in a way that made me feel chosen. Not excitingly chosen, but reasonably chosen, like I was a safe decision. I told myself that was better. I told myself that love didn't have to feel like fireworks to be real. Sometimes, I thought, fireworks only burn you in the end. In the beginning, everything about him felt subtle but reassuring. He remembered details about my life, asked about my day, nodded when I spoke, and those small gestures felt like emotional maturity. I mistook his quietness for depth, his distance for independence, his restraint for stability. When friends asked how it felt, I said it was easy, peaceful, drama-free, and I wore those words proudly, as if choosing calm meant I had finally learned something about love. What I didn't realize then was that calm can also be empty, and peace can sometimes be the absence of care. The first time he canceled plans, I barely noticed the disappointment. He texted an hour before we were supposed to meet, said work ran late, added a brief apology, and suggested we reschedule. I told myself that adults understand responsibilities, that real life isn't romantic all the time. The second time it happened, I smiled and said it was fine, even though I had already gotten dressed and was waiting. The third time, something inside me tightened, but I pushed it down quickly, afraid of what it might mean if I examined it too closely. He wasn't doing anything wrong, I told myself. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't cheating. He wasn't cruel. He was just busy, and busy felt like a reasonable excuse for almost everything. Slowly, without realizing it, I became the one adjusting my expectations. I stopped getting excited about plans until they actually happened. I kept my phone nearby, but pretended I wasn't waiting. When hours passed without a response, I filled the silence with explanations on his behalf. He's tired. He's stressed. He's not good at texting. Each excuse made me feel mature, understanding, emotionally evolved. I told myself that needing less made me stronger, but at night, when the world went quiet, I noticed how alone I felt. Even though I was technically in a relationship, that loneliness didn't arrive suddenly. It crept in slowly, hiding behind logic, disguising itself as patience. When I tried to talk about how I felt, he never argued. That was the confusing part. He listened, nodded, said things like, "I didn't realize you felt that way," or "I'll try to be better," in a tone so calm that it made my emotions feel excessive. There was no urgency in his promises, no curiosity about my pain, just a vague willingness that never turned into action. And somehow, every conversation ended with me feeling guilty for bringing it up at all. I started apologizing for my feelings before he ever asked me to. I softened my words, minimized my needs, added disclaimers like, "I know this is silly," or "I'm probably overthinking," hoping that if I made myself smaller, my emotions would be easier for him to handle. Over time, I noticed how careful I had become. I rehearsed conversations in my head before having them, editing out anything that sounded like a demand. I learned which topics made him quiet, which questions made him uncomfortable, and I avoided them, convincing myself that compromise was love. Friends began to notice changes before I did. They asked why he was never around, why I always defended him even when no one attacked, why I looked tired in a way that didn't match my words. I told them he was just private, just reserved, just not expressive, and I believed it because believing it kept the story intact. Admitting the truth would have meant admitting that something was wrong, and nothing felt wrong enough to justify leaving. There was no dramatic betrayal, no obvious villain, just a steady pattern of emotional absence that was easy to explain and even easier to ignore. I started celebrating small things that should have been basic. A quick check-in text made my day. A short phone call felt like a gift. When he showed up, even halfway, I felt grateful instead of hurt. I didn't realize how low my standards had dropped until I began feeling proud of how little I asked for. The relationship survived because I carried it. I initiated conversations, planned time together, checked in emotionally, adjusted my schedule, adjusted my expectations, adjusted myself. He simply existed within it, comfortable and unchallenged. Sometimes I wondered what would happen if I stopped trying, but the thought scared me. I was afraid of what silence might confirm. There were moments that should have mattered more than they did. Times when I needed reassurance and received logic instead. When I needed comfort and got advice. When I wanted presence and got distance. Each time I told myself I was learning independence. In reality, I was learning how to be alone with someone else. The night of my birthday arrived quietly. I didn't expect anything extravagant. I hadn't asked for a party or a surprise. All I wanted was for him to be there, to choose me without being reminded. We had talked about it days before. He said he remembered. He said we'd spend the evening together. I believed him because I wanted to. That afternoon, I got ready slowly, choosing an outfit I knew he liked, telling myself not to overthink it. Hours passed without a message. When I finally checked my phone, there was a text saying he was running late, followed by another saying he was exhausted, followed by silence. I sat there, dressed and waiting, listening to the quiet stretch longer than it should have. When he eventually arrived, his energy was low, his attention scattered. He hugged me briefly, apologized softly, said work had been overwhelming. He didn't ask how I felt. He didn't notice how carefully I was holding myself together. We sat across from each other, the space between us heavier than words. There was no fight, no raised voices, no scene that would make this moment easy to explain. Just the ache of realizing that even on the one day I hoped to feel chosen, I felt invisible. As the night ended and he prepared to leave early because he was tired, I smiled and said it was fine, because that had become my reflex. After he walked away, I sat alone and felt something settle in my chest, something heavy and undeniable. For the first time, I allowed myself to think the thought I had been avoiding for so long. I wasn't asking for too much. I was asking the wrong person. And as the candles burned out quietly, I realized something that scared me more than being alone. I realized I had never felt more lonely than I did loving him. And still, even then, I didn't leave. After my birthday, nothing changed on the surface, and that was what frightened me the most. There was no apology that led to effort, no sudden awareness. No shift that made me feel seen. Life simply continued, smooth and quiet, as if the loneliness I felt had been a private misunderstanding rather than a shared reality. I told myself not to make a big deal out of one night, even though it wasn't just one night. It was the accumulation of countless small moments where I felt like an afterthought. Still, I stayed, because staying felt easier than unraveling years of justification. But something inside me had already started to loosen its grip. I began paying attention in a way I hadn't before, not to his words, but to patterns. I noticed how rarely he asked questions about my inner world, how my emotions seemed to confuse him rather than matter to him. I noticed how conversations flowed effortlessly when they were about logistics or surface-level topics, and how quickly they stalled when they required vulnerability. I started wondering how long I'd been carrying the emotional weight of two people while calling it love. For the first time, I experimented with silence, not as a test, but as an act of self-preservation. I stopped initiating texts just to see what would happen. Hours turned into days. When he finally reached out, it was casual, as if nothing had shifted, as if my absence had gone unnoticed until it inconvenienced him. "You've been quiet lately," he said, not with concern, but with mild curiosity. That sentence echoed in my head longer than it should have. Quiet lately, as if my emotional withdrawal were a phase rather than a response. I realized then that he hadn't missed me. He had missed my effort. The version of me who filled gaps, smoothed edges, made things easy. I thought about all the times I had softened my needs so they wouldn't disrupt his comfort, and I felt something close to grief for the woman I'd been slowly erasing. I began reclaiming small pieces of myself. I spent time alone without explaining it. I let messages sit unanswered when I didn't have the energy to perform enthusiasm. I stopped planning everything. And with each boundary, subtle as it was, the distance between us became clearer. Not because it grew, but because it had always been there. One evening, after a long day that left me emotionally raw, I called him, hoping for comfort, hoping for something I had stopped asking for directly. He answered, listened for a moment, then said he was exhausted and needed to sleep. He didn't ask follow-up questions. He didn't suggest talking another time. He simply disengaged. After we hung up, I stared at the ceiling in the dark and finally allowed myself to name the truth without softening it. I was lonely in my own relationship. That sentence didn't feel dramatic. It felt factual. And once I said it to myself, I couldn't unhear it. The realization didn't bring immediate clarity. It brought sadness, confusion, and a strange sense of relief. Relief because there was finally an explanation for the emptiness I had been carrying. I stopped asking myself what was wrong with me and started asking what was missing. The answer was presence, emotional availability, effort, things that cannot be begged into existence. I watched how easily he moved through life without noticing my quiet unraveling, how my pain never interrupted his routines, how love, for him, required very little adjustment. I thought about the future and felt a heaviness settle in my chest. I imagined years of this, years of convincing myself that loneliness was normal, years of shrinking to fit beside someone who never truly met me. That image scared me more than leaving ever could. The conversation happened on an ordinary day. There was no dramatic setup, no perfect timing. I simply reached a point where staying silent felt like a betrayal of myself. I told him I needed to talk, and when we sat down, I spoke slowly, carefully, because old habits die hard. I told him I felt unseen, unheard, emotionally alone. I told him I had been carrying the relationship and losing myself in the process. He listened quietly, the same way he always did, and for a moment, I wondered if this time would be different. Then he said he was sorry I felt that way. Not sorry he made me feel that way, just sorry that I did. That distinction landed harder than any argument ever could. In that moment, I understood everything I needed to know. He wasn't unwilling to listen. He was unwilling to change. And I realized that love without accountability is just comfort for one person and quiet suffering for the other. Ending it didn't feel explosive. There were no raised voices, no tears that changed his mind. He accepted it calmly, almost relieved, and that calmness confirmed what my heart had already learned. I walked away feeling hollow, but also strangely intact. The days after were harder than I expected. I questioned myself constantly, replaying memories, wondering if I had exaggerated my pain, if I had expected too much from someone who simply loved differently. But as time passed, something unexpected happened. The weight I had been carrying began to lift. I noticed how peaceful my mornings felt without waiting for a message, how my emotions felt valid without being minimized, how I could breathe again without apologizing for taking up space. Healing didn't arrive as happiness. It arrived as clarity. I learned that being alone is not the same as being lonely, and that the loneliest place I had ever been was beside someone who didn't see me. I learned that kindness without presence is not love, that calm without effort is not safety, and that a relationship should not require you to disappear in order to survive it. I stopped romanticizing emotional neglect just because it wasn't loud. I stopped measuring love by how little it hurt me and started measuring it by how deeply it showed up. Looking back, I don't feel anger toward him. He wasn't a villain. He simply wasn't my partner, and I forgive myself for staying as long as I did because I stayed hoping, and hope is not a weakness. Today, I trust my feelings more than I ever have. I know that needing reassurance does not make me needy, that wanting presence does not make me demanding, and that love should feel like being met, not managed. If you're listening to this and questioning your own feelings, wondering if what you're experiencing is really that bad, let me tell you this. You don't need a dramatic reason to leave something that is slowly erasing you. Love should not feel like silence you have to explain away. It should not feel like begging to be seen. And if you feel lonely in a relationship, that loneliness is telling you the truth, even when the person you love never will.